Hi YouTubers, Crud Big Rig here again, and I'd like to show you my first general review of several guns, particularly pistols, that have really changed the way we think of firearms. First would be Glock Model 19, probably one of the best concealed carry pistols out there, at least for a man my size. I'm 6'4", 300 pounds. This can be concealed very, very easily for me. Next would be the Browning High Power. Now this is a FN model. It's a 9mm, and it features a very unique safety system to it that's unlike anything else I've ever seen. This is a perfected 1911, so to speak, even though it only shoots the 9mm round. And then there is the original, the 1911. This gun has been designed well over 100 years ago, before computers were out, before even machinists really knew what they were doing. This was a piece of art. Now, this gun in particular is a Kimber Desert Warrior. Now, I know that a lot of you have had issues with Kimber's quality control. This gun runs. I'm actually going to start putting together a torture test of this pistol, hopefully 1,000 to 2,000 rounds over the next 2 months, just to see what it'll do. I'm only going to use very light lubrication, and I'm going to see if it comes even close to the Glock 19. Is it in the shot? We'll first start with the 1911. There's a lot of misconceptions about this pistol. One being that it is unreliable. Mr. James Yeager from Tactical Response has been an avid Glock lover, and personally I love them too. 1911s are pretty, I'll agree with him, but you also have to understand how they run. They were never really put forth to put 8 to 10 magazines through them. The U.S. military usually only had 5 to 6 magazines at maximum for this individual soldier. One of the issues that a lot of people don't realize is that you can't let the slide slam forward. If you were to push the slide release and let it push forward, it can actually damage the fire controls. One of the major designs of this pistol was that when the magazine was inserted, the .45 caliber round, once the slide hit it, acted as a hydraulic buffer. This would cause the slide to slow down before reaching into battery. It's a very accurate pistol because of the single stage trigger. A lot of people don't like that for concealed carry, but I've personally used this several times in the winter. In fact, it's my preferred concealed carry pistol just because of how accurate it is. That's not to say that the Glock isn't, it just has a different trigger that I'm personally not used to. It has an ambidextrous safety to it. It has a right hand magazine release. It's a little bit rough to push in, but with use it gets better. Now, a lot of these pistols have said that they need 500, sometimes up to 1,000 rounds of break-in period for them, and I personally have witnessed several malfunctions. They tend to be magazine related, but the biggest issue being in the feed ramp area. The feed ramp has a problem where once the round starts pushing up into the feed ramp, it gets caught in the barrel. That causes a jam, a malfunction. John Browning redesigned this pistol in the FN High Power. He created a chamber guide that was actually a part of the barrel. Now, this pistol I can very confidently shoot out to 50 yards with, but I wouldn't want to push it any further. It's usually a 7 or 8 round detachable magazine to it, and it also has tritium night sights, which I will never have taken off. I've also lubricated this with frog lube. This is the FN Browning High Power. It has quite a few differences to it compared to the 1911. First off, it was the very first pistol to use a double stack magazine. That meant that you could increase the round count by literally double. Most of these, I do believe, were a 13 round magazine, which was very high capacity in its day. It uses a much simpler takedown method. Unlike the captured guide rod in the traditional 1911, it uses an internal guide rod. This pistol is very easy to disassemble. You just simply push the slide release out. The slide comes off the frame. Your guide rod spring comes out, and then your actual barrel assembly comes out. If you notice, this gun is quite wet because I'm doing another torture test on it as well. I don't like this pistol due to the increased trigger pull. However, as a combat rated pistol, it's completely fine. This pistol has been used by the British Special Air Service for the last 30 years. They finally replaced it in the early 80s with the P226 from Sig Sauer. To reassemble, you simply realign and push straight down. Now, one of the unique things about this pistol that I like is it has a very peculiar safety. A lot of pistols, down is fire, up is safe. This is a very unique pistol in the fact that you actually push the hammer forward to put it on safe. To take it off safe, you push the safety lever down. And again, this pistol is ambidextrous on the safety lever. This pistol is also relatively accurate, although not as accurate as my Glock or the 1911. This pistol is a derivative of the Glock Model 17. It has a slightly shorter barrel and a slightly shorter grip. I'm a firm believer that if I cannot get a firm grip on the pistol, I don't need to be shooting it. It uses a double stack magazine, and the capacity is 15+1, which is outstanding for a compact pistol. It uses tritium night sights as well, as do all of my fighting pistols. The only gripe I actually have about the pistol is the slide release. That's why most, when they're training with this pistol, actually prefer to use the quote-unquote slingshot method of coming up after the slide is locked back, pulling back and releasing. This pistol is also good out to 50 yards, even though a lot of you might not believe that. I'll be showing you in a video later. I am definitely not a master pistol shooter. However, this does more than what I need for most jobs. To take this Glock apart is very, very simple. You check to make sure that the magazine is out and the chamber is clear. You have to release the striker by pulling the trigger. That's the only disadvantage of the Glock compared to all the other pistols that I've shown. You slowly pull back the slide just slightly and pull back, slide, release. It's that simple. You pull your recoil spring out and then you proceed to pull your barrel assembly. To reinstall, it's very simple. You just simply realign the rails to the slide and pull back. Now that I have all the pistols disassembled for you, you can see a progression from a great many parts to a much simpler design to an even simpler design of the Glock. Now this isn't bashing in any way, it's just a progression of technology. Here you have a very heavily machined frame. You have your slide release, which also retains the barrel. You also have a two-piece recoil spring and retainer. This also helps support the barrel just slightly. You have a plunger to keep on the end of this spring. You have a barrel bushing that actually sits inside the pistol itself, and this allows the barrel to slide back and forth appropriately. You have a barrel that is quite complex for the time. You have a retainer here that mates with the actual magazine slide release. This also allows the barrel to pivot slightly when it's out of battery. And then you also have a very complex slide to machine. It's a beautiful slide, but it's complex nonetheless. Then you have the FN high power. Now this is a modified design, as you can see from the disassembly. John Moses Browning had taken quite a few parts and either combined them or took them away altogether. The frame is a lot smaller because of the 9mm round. It's also a double stack magazine. The slide release simply pulls out instead of a complex pull back alignment notch and then pulling out of the magazine release. You still have your recoil spring and recoil spring guide, but it's a lot smaller, and it also doubles as that eyelet. It's also a slightly simplified barrel because you don't have any extra machining processes to put that eyelet in. And the actual slide itself does not have a bushing or a plunger to keep the recoil spring in. Instead, the recoil spring is actually installed from the inside. And then you have the Glock, which is a very simplified design. It still uses John Browning's breech lock system. It still has a recoil spring, even though, as you see here, the recoil spring guide is completely put into this recoil spring so that you can't lose it. The frame is polymer. It's a lot lighter. It's a lot simpler to manufacture. And the slide itself, even though it's slightly heavier than the 9mm high power, it's almost on par with the 1911 because of its mass. Now, as you see here, there's a lot less machining processes involved. They only have to slightly curl the edges, as opposed to a 1911 where they have a nice radius all the way around. They also, if you notice here, the chamber area is a lot cleaner, a little bit bigger on the 1911, but that's because of the caliber more than the round. The only other difference is, because this is a compact pistol, the sight radius is just ever so slightly smaller. And if you look underneath, the design looks pretty darn similar, except for it being a striker fired pistol. Now, the feeding of the magazine is a completely different story. You have a feed lip on the 1911 on the actual frame, and the problem is most failures occur when you have your lockup, and if you can see right there, the feed lip, as the round starts entering into the chamber, you have to jump from this feed lip into here. Well, what happens is a lot of the times it gets stuck getting up into that feed lip. I have a feeling that John Browning knew this was an issue, considering that in the FN High Power that design is completely changed. Here you have no feed lip at all. Instead, the actual barrel has the feed ramp. As you can see here, that's a much simpler design. The round feeds almost straight in to the barrel. And the Glock, of course, copied this design. Now I'm going to quickly reassemble all these pistols to show you the different variations of how things are done. We'll start off with the 1911 since it seems to be the classic. This is my personal favorite pistol, however it is not a go-to war pistol. I have not put 1,000 rounds through this consecutively to see if it will feed accurately and reliably, and that's been a big issue with custom 1911s that have a high tolerance range. What you start off with is obviously make sure that there's no magazine in here. You take your slide, you put the barrel straight in like so. Then you put your barrel bushing in, slide it all the way to the right side of the pistol. Then you feed in your recoil spring and guide rod, which also helps stop this eyelet from moving forward. Next is a little iffy because some guys actually like to take this spring off, put the slide in. I prefer to keep it as such. You actually mate the receiver with the slide and you just pull it straight back. What you want to do is you slide this frame up to the indexing notch. You take your slide release, insert it like so, and push straight forward. Then you want to put your plunger in, push straight down until it locks in. Then of course you do a function check. Next is the FN High Power, which is a lot easier to do. Start out with the slide again. However, you actually put it in similar to a Glock instead of sliding it straight through because of this wall that's been created for it. You pull the barrel straight back, then you put your recoil spring in. You make sure it's attached appropriately. Then you align the slide, which should be at what I call the 0 point of the slide. There's no movement forward, there's no movement back. It's where it should be when it's assembled. You just simply push the magazine slide release in. Again, function check. And that's right, FN likes to put magazine disconnects on their pistols. I am definitely going to have to disable that eventually, but safety works. Now the Glock. Again, just slippery. you put the barrel assembly in just like the high power. You put your recoil spring in, make sure it's set correctly. Align the slide. That's it.